name is Rodolfo Nieto. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, moved to Minnesota about 11 years ago now. I come from a background of Mexican heritage as well as Western European heritage. And it's been fun being here in the past couple of years, especially exploring a lot of what that means to me. And I'll talk about that more as we go on with our talk today.
Hi, my name is Gabriela Estephanie Solís. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. I come from a Panamanian and Mexican American background, and I'm really excited for these talks with Rodolfo and Natalia today.
What was that like growing up, in a Mexican household or a Mexican Panamanian household?
I grew up in South San Jose, which has a very, very strong both Vietnamese and Mexican American community, but
Hmm.
very little Central American
Hmm.
community, just because most Panamanians, when they immigrate, they go to Florida. So all
Hmm.
the Panamanians are in the complete opposite side of the country, but my mom somehow ended up in the Bay Area. So I had this really weird experience where I had this micro culture, micro bubble of a culture, but everything around me was Mexican American, and the other immigrant groups in the Bay Area. So
Yeah.
as I think about that, those are definitely important factors, that
Yeah.
affected
Yeah.
my upbringing. And I'm curious what it was like in Chicago.
During that time where I was, there's a distinct, uh, those distinct cultures. I would say mainly the Irish and the Polish cultures were kind of the more dominant in the neighborhoods that I lived in. And I'm trying to think if there are any other kind of. No, again, it's predominantly, I mean, truly the suburbs. And you think about like what these suburbs are and what they were meant to be. This kind of commercialized safe haven, and I'll put that in quotes, safe
Yeah,
haven.
it's a fantasy,
Um,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Fantasy
yeah.
dream.
That that I grew up in, and so again, my delving into my experiences into Mexican culture were predominantly when I would see my dad's side of the family, and again, that was often. I mean, for holidays and parties, uh, but it was that to me growing up was always the other. It was not my norm. Um, and again, so I recognized that distinction growing up of seeing that was kind of the microcosm that I would visit and then come back from. I'm curious, you because you brought up now that you have Panamanian and Mexican background. Could you enlighten me in a bit in what the differences in culture are there? I know they are vast. Generally, they are vast because every country, every culture has their different history and their different um, societal and cultural norms.
When I was younger, I wanted to be more Mexican American so I could fit
Hmm.
in with the community. My Central Americanness was this weird thing that it was, for me, it was the other in a way. You
Hmm.
said that the Mexican community that you connected to with your dad's family was um, maybe a little fragmented from your life. For me, my Central American side was more fragmented from the Mexican American culture I was surrounded
Hmm.
by, and I wished I could fit in. I wish I knew how to make all this delicious Mexican food that all my friends' moms made, and
Sure. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish I could sing along to all the Vicente Fernandez songs. Like, I recognize them, but I couldn't sing along with everyone else. And I always, uh, people say that they feel out of place when they're talking about white culture versus their immigrant culture, but I felt like I fit fine into white culture. It was actually I felt a distinction between my Central American culture and my the Mexican American culture. I
Yeah.
always felt out of one or the other,
Yeah. You
which
use
were
the word. You use the word when talking about tamales. You said, "Why do they make them so weird?" And it's funny how we grow up, even if nobody forces it upon us. It's just what we see around us. That there's either a right way or a wrong way, or a normal way and the weird way to do things. When that's not the case, it just completely depends on what you're surrounded by, and within that, what you're pressured to like or not like, or to present or not present to. Um, and I think it's really good to hear that that struggle also exists, not just between what we deem what we call the races, but also within those cultures, those subcultures, um, and even within a place like Mexico too. I mean, if you're talking to Mexico, you're talking northern Mexico, you're talking Yucatan, are you talking Oaxaca, are you talking Acapulco,
Exactly.
like Baja California? It's so different. It's like to me, it's akin to the United States too. There's no one kind of American. It's not the South, not the North, not the West, not the Midwest, not the East Coast. It's there's so much variety that there can be a real struggle, and I think it all just depends on where you grew up and the kind of community that places what we call a norm on us.
I speak fluent Spanish because my mom doesn't really speak English, so I've had to keep my Spanish really going. But I find that when I go home to Colombia, I sound so American. It's not even
Yeah.
like the accent, but I don't know the slang.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I know some slang, but I'm like, is it rude slang? Like, is my grandma gonna yell at me if she hears me saying those words? And I'm just curious to know your experiences in somebody who identifies as Latino or Latinx and is living your life as somebody who lives that identity, but also maybe grapples with their use of language and fitting into Latino communities where that might be a barrier.
Hmm.
Thinking about how so much is impacted by family. My brother is my half brother, and he's about 13 years older than me. And when he was growing up, he told my mom he didn't want to learn to speak Spanish. He told her to not force him to speak Spanish, and she said okay. So when I came along, she assumed that I wanted the same thing.
Mm.
So she didn't teach me Spanish, or didn't formally teach it. She would talk to me and I would understand, but I would never speak back in Spanish, and she never made me. She never read to me in Spanish. Uh, it just wasn't something we did. But my grandma grew up with us, so I was forced to learn Spanish through interacting with her, and I'm so glad I had at least that little bit of contact. My Spanish language uh, proficiency or lack of proficiency has been a huge source of shame and guilt. And so throughout my entire life, I've just felt this both externally imposed and self-imposed shame for not being completely fluent. And
Hmm.
it's really difficult because you could say, sure, just practice with your mom, but I don't know how to explain it, but there's a wall there's a language barrier there that I don't know will ever be taken down. I can't speak Spanish with her. It is just so it just feels so wrong. She would encourage it now, but
Hmm.
I can't speak Spanish with her. Even my aunt, the only person I can speak Spanish with comfortably is my grandma because we have that language relationship. So
Mm.
I I relish any chance I get to practice. It's not a lot, but I try to watch TV shows in Spanish. I try to find easy things to read, but
Yeah.
but again, I'm never gonna have the fluency that you would get if you grew up with the language or if you lived in a country, and
Right.
that's always it's a little bit sad to me.
Yeah. I love that you used the phrase language relationship. I never really thought about that, and but language is one of the primary ways that we communicate. Um, and there is a relationship within that. I mean, even with outside of loved ones and family and friends too, with your day-to-day interactions too, the language you speak establishes a relationship too. Um, but I completely understand that shame. I can't speak to the external forces obviously that you feel. It's astounding though that anybody, any culture, anywhere would shame anybody for something that was out of their hands, that was out of their choice. Similarly, I wasn't, from what I understand, although my mother embraced embraces the Mexican culture and speaks Spanish fluently and has learned that too, um, and wanted us to be bilingual growing up, or wanted to speak it more. My understanding of it is that my dad, who also spoke Spanish, he grew up in Texas, was born and raised in Texas, and moved to Chicago area, but he was speaking more English, and we were just raised on the diet of the English language. Um, and I would go to those parties and see my family and hear the Spanish, and it didn't stop me from enjoying being with them. And I'd hear them chat and be like, "Okay, cool. What's going on?" Say my few words that I know, and then run off and play. Um, and I'm lucky that nobody ever shamed me externally. Although I got the looks in from the Spanish teachers, like, you're better than you think, and then maybe I was, but I still needed the help. I still needed the experience and the community to talk to. And for years, that self shame of why haven't I learned this yet? Why haven't I learned this? Why haven't I forced myself to do more, to do better? I want this, which even led me to study as I was doing more operatic studies to learn French and learn Italian and learn German, like all these other languages, and still kind of avoid Spanish because there's an emotion attached to that. There is a language relationship even with myself. Um, and until finally just whether it's attached to the ego, and the fear or the pride or whatever it might be, just going, do what you can and screw it up, make your mistakes. um, and I started that about 6 years ago, and now I feel better. I say that I'm fluent in Spanish. I still have lots to learn. I'm not a native speaker. um, And going back to what Natalia was saying, that about slang and stuff, I don't even know English slang anymore. Like I don't speak in English slang. I can hear things and understand most of it. So when I'm with my friends who are Mexican or from other Latin American countries who are speaking together, and I hear them say phrases, I have no qualm about saying, what does that mean? I have no idea what you're talking about right now. I don't know that metaphor. I don't know that slang. And just know that I live in, and perhaps we live in, this kind of borderland of indistinct roots in like one specific culture. So embrace it. I'm always going to be in that borderland area, but that means I get to enjoy all the sides of it, and even the things that I have no connection to. And I'll forever be a student in that way. And screw shame. I hate it. You try to shame me, I don't need you in my life.
I love that comment that you made about like I get both sides. And I think for me, a lot of the time, I feel like I get half of two sides. And
Hmm.
I don't know, I really appreciate that mindset. And I'm going to try to apply that mindset both if I get
Hmm.
to enjoy that I live on two sides of a border instead of mourning the loss of having to live in a border.
Again, I think about language relationships. I'm gonna take that phrase now, Gabriela.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that. Language relationships. It's perfect.
How did you get involved with music? I mean, I know that Latino culture values music, but you're both classical musicians, and that is not always prized in Latino culture.
Hmm.
I'm curious to know more about what that journey started like for you and how it looks now as performers and solo performers too for a lot of the work that you do.
So I pursued opera for a long time. That journey began in high school. Prior to that, I was an instrumentalist. I was a trombonist, and I did that a lot: jazz trombone, orchestral trombone, band, marching band. It was part of, again, the community that I was surrounded by. And I'm very grateful and lucky, fortunate that I was encouraged by so many people, my family as well as my teachers, um, to pursue this. And in high school, I learned, compared to my other colleagues, that I had a very, I had a uniquely distinct, deeper voice, and so that was encouraged through choral singing and such, which, with the influences I had and the teachers that I had, they encouraged operatic studies, and I was introduced to that music, and I loved it. And classical music I already loved, so I pursued that in college. I went to Luther College in Iowa,
You went to
and
Luther?
I went to Luther. Yeah,
What? I didn't
yeah.
know that.
Yeah, I went to Luther. And then went to Northwestern for graduate school after that. By that time, I stopped playing trombone. I was fully focused on an operatic career, life, classical singing, and that. And that I pursued solely, and which is what eventually brought me to Minnesota in 2009 to sing with the opera company. I point behind me because they're across the river that way. Um, and once moving here, once I finished working with them, I found myself with a period of time of having no work whatsoever. And thankfully, there's so much theater here, and I was going out and seeing theater, and I had a lot of friends who were involved in the other theaters in town, so I started seeing more and more, and realizing that I was missing the musical theater that I did in high school and that I did in an earlier time. So I began studying again, began studying acting and kind of switching my focus from solely doing opera and classical repertoire to musical theater repertoire, and started auditioning for that. And now I'm involved in the musical theater community as well, and the theater community. I've worked with Mixed Blood Theater. Just did a show with Park Square on Zoom in late July and August. That was a lot of fun. And then Theater Latte Da and a couple other theaters in the area doing musical theater work, which has been great and fun and um, revealed so much about what I enjoy about just being on stage. As far as it connects to Latinidad, in 2017, I wanted to do a classical recital with one friend of mine, Bergen Baker, who we were planning to do something, and then she became very busy. She wasn't able to do it. So I called another friend of mine, Alejandro Magayon, who has since now moved back to Houston, and I'm very bitter about that still. He and his family. Which, funny enough, he is married to a dear friend of mine from college. So that's how we first met. And then when they moved up to Minnesota, we reconnected, and he is from Acapulco and La Paz, Mexico, but his mother was born in Minnesota, so he has that kind of connection. Whereas my father's family is from San Luis Potosi, but my mother's from the Midwest, so we had that similarity. Anyway, we wanted to do a recital, and we started looking at classical stuff, and he said, "Well, why don't we look at some Mexican music?" So I looked at the 3 or 4 Mexican songs I could find in a classical book. That's not where you look for music in that kind of repertoire. So I started there. I'm like, I'm not really finding stuff here. And then we began listening to recordings, and I started hearing songs that I remembered hearing in the past, and going, this could be really a lot of fun. And he encouraged, well, if we do this, we should really get guitarists and not just have a piano recital, because that's a lot of the music is based in that.
Yeah.
So we forwarded that idea, and we eventually we find 3 guys who accompany us, and we do a recital in 2016. And we loved it so much that we did another one, and we had a great response from the audience. And we did another one in 2017, which we recorded and put on YouTube. And that just kind of skyrocketed this whole idea of this music that I just truly embrace and love doing. It, as you say about language, it speaks to my soul. There's something in it when I sing it, when I hear it, that I just love. And if I can find more ways to do that and bring that to the stage and engage fellow artists in the area here to get both the community, the Latinx community on stage, and getting the broader Minnesotan community to join and enjoy that as well and experience it as well. Mi prontito me parece que es la hora del guapango. Mi prontito me parece que es la hora del guapango. Mientras su boca se mece, yo nomás le estoy mirando. Y a la que se entremece le pregunto ¿qué hubo cuando? ¿Qué hubo, qué hubo, qué hubo, qué hubo, qué hubo, qué hubo cuando? I think simply put is that any performance that I do, I work to make it as authentic and real as possible. But there's something very personal about the Latinx music that when I sing and perform that, it's like reaching back into that past, into the roots, into history. I'm not presenting a story or a fictional narrative, even though it's a very real narrative on the stage, like you would do in opera or musical theater. It just touches that personal side, and then also in the presentation of the music, I feel more flexibility to add my personal touches in the arrangement of it, or how I play it too, and I'll show that in a little bit when we share some music together.
I love that.
Yeah.
Gabby, I know that you started as an instrumentalist.
Yeah, I didn't get involved with music until I think middle school. I joined middle school band, and from there I was really into marching band for a long time. I would say actually most of the most important musical skills I have I learned from marching band, in terms of discipline, in terms of teamwork, in terms of commitment, in terms of setting a challenge and going for it as a group. Those are all things I I didn't learn that in college. I learned that in high school marching band, which feels really dorky to say, but it's the truth. I was really lucky to have a really, um, I could say intense because it was intense, but it was a very involved music program in my high school, and we had a band director who really focused on teamwork and group skills, and that's been something that's been really important to me throughout my music career. So I went into my undergrad as an English major and a music um, minor, but on the flute because I was a flutist. And one of the requirements was that music minors or majors had to be in multiple ensembles throughout their years. And there was they had choir auditions, and I thought, hey, okay, let me try this choir thing. I did some choir in elementary school. Let's see how this goes. And the director happened to be really into early music, and he was a really great director. And I fell in love with choir, and here I am, a few years later, still singing. I when I graduated, there are kind of two professional tracks that I've been on. I have a career as an English composition instructor, and I've really enjoyed that. I have my master's from San Francisco State, and I'm currently teaching an online writing class here at Haverford.
Mm.
But I also have my music career that I've been so thankful and privileged to be able to follow. I freelanced in the Bay Area for a while. Um, and early music, just because we talk about the influence of educators. My first choral teacher was an early music specialist, so that paved the way for years and years of just early music baroque specialization. And I don't do it. I have more variety in my classical music making nowadays, thanks to Border Crossing and thanks to other groups. But early music will always be kind of my first classical music love, if that makes sense, because I have so
Mhm.
many great memories. The first time I ever sang a solo on stage in front of people was Bach. So that, as much as I appreciate other time periods of music and classical music or even non-classical music, Baroque music always has this kind of little special place in my heart. Just working with Border Crossing from the La Pasión project last year was, I think it marked a huge point of departure, not departure, but a huge uh,
Pivot.
path change in terms of what I visualize for my career as a classical musician. When I sang with Border Crossings, I just had this epiphany, like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be feeling when I perform.
Mm.
When I perform Baroque music, I felt happiness and I felt inspiration because as a choir, as a team, we had come together and performed something beautiful. And I did feel this aesthetic appreciation for the music. The music is very, very aesthetically pretty, I think. And I felt an appreciation for soloists or other performers giving a heartfelt experience. But like Rodolfo said, none of that was personal. And with Border Crossings, I had all of those things plus a personal connection. And I mean, how can you compete with that? What
Mm.
what else can compete with that?
Have you found your professional interests modified, changed, or altered by the pandemic and the quarantining now that we have? And I don't know if you've lost opportunities or maybe gained opportunities because of everything that has shifted in the world right now. Has anything changed in that, or have you found time to reflect and look forward in your own personal development?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, to kind of all of the questions.
Yeah.
So, uh, I I had a weird, unique situation where I moved in the middle of the pandemic from the Baltimore area to the Philly area. So even outside of a pandemic, that for most musicians that signals a kind of change. You have to re-network. You have to create new relationships. You have to re-audition, or you have to audition for a lot of new places. And when I moved here, I just didn't do that, and I've been reflecting a lot lately on, I guess, being pickier with what I put my musical energy into,
Hmm.
and you know, having pretty much no music, no music opportunities in the last few months has made me realize, has forced me to think about which ones I actually miss. And when I think about the
Yeah.
music organizations and the people that I really miss and wish I could get back into, it's probably only about 10%
Hmm.
of the groups I've worked with, and of course one of those is border crossings. So I've been thinking about how I want to go about my music career in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
I on a more like personal level, I have just not felt inspired to sing through most of this. I've realized that what I enjoy about singing uh, is the social aspect, is the social connection. So with no one to sing with or no one to sing for, I've just not been inspired. I do the singing that I need to do every day to keep the voice healthy and to keep my technique going. And I have a lesson every 2 weeks with a really wonderful teacher. But uh, it's been an interesting halt in my music career. How about you?
Yeah. Similarly, early on, I was about to open up La Boheme with Theater Latte Da here in Minneapolis. We had our um, uh, final open dress rehearsal preview. That's they call it previews. Thank you. They call it previews. We had our final preview on the 13th, March 13th, and even before we did the preview, they said we're going to have to close for at least 2 weeks, and then it became okay, at least okay until further notice, essentially. Um, and and so those first few weeks, I mean, there was a lot of like, well, what am I going to do? And then okay, well, I have plenty of time to practice, and I started practicing my usual rep, and then slowly going, I don't want to sing this anymore. Why am I singing this? If the only reason I was singing this is to prepare for an audition, and we're having no auditions, am I singing it for myself? Honestly, no. Okay, then figure out. Well, then that being said, do you want to sing? I do want to sing. Well, then figure out what you want to sing, because you can't do the same old if it brings you no satisfaction. So that was one thing, and so I did delve into, okay, let me try some more songs from Mexico, like I've been doing, and I've been playing guitar for the past 3 years now, specifically to learn that. So I have been singing more of that music, and accompanying myself with that. Another thing I've been doing is writing music. Actually,
Oh wow.
I did it a little bit. I get dabbled back in high school. I just started writing arrangements and doing little things, and then I dropped it for whatever reason. Um, and this summer, I started writing a couple little fun tunes, basic kind of a jazz, simple chord structure background. But more recently, in response to my wife is having a lot of health difficulties with pancreatitis,
I'm sorry.
and just the pain of that and the frustration around that all, that it's urged me to create this entire like multi-movement work,
Wow.
um, that I'm now working with a pianist friend of mine, Jeremy Walker, who's a composer and pianist in the cities here, to develop it into a bigger performable piece. I don't know when or where we'll perform it, but it was very cathartic just to write out my own lyrics and to write out this music to both, number one, it was for myself to be just a kind of emotional release. Two, to help my wife understand that I'm seeing what she's going through as well, and then also to connect with anybody else who is experiencing some kind of caretaker and patient relationship, because that's kind of a universal theme. So it's been I've had the time now, being in the pandemic, to sit at my piano or just go for a walk and play around with ideas, and that's been a new development that I'm going to try to keep forwarding as much as I can as we move forward.
It's amazing that you've been able to find something that connects to someone,
Mhm.
right? That is for someone and connects to someone. And I haven't found that yet.
Yeah.
And I hope to find that soon.
Mhm.
Um, because music and singing is something I love.
Yeah.
I know I do want it to be a part of my life. Uh, I need to do more exploring
Yeah.
and self-reflection to figure out how I want it to be a part of my life in a way that's sincere, a
Yeah.
way that actually represents me.
Absolutely. My verb of the year has been discovery.
Yeah,
Like we have to learn that we need to figure out how to discover what it is that is going to resonate and is going to liberate us artistically, musically, and in every way.
in the last few years, I haven't been in a seeking discovery mode. I've been in a take whatever gig that comes that's going to pay my bills
Mhm.
mode. And
Right. Right.
changing from that mindset to a discovery mindset is huge.
Mhm.
And and I need more time, but I'm working towards it, and it's definitely something I want to change too.
The final portion of our interview is the song share. These song shares are drawn from our community sings, something we do during the year with our community, and it's a chance for people to come together and make music. Enjoy.
The piece I've picked is Demos Gracias from La Pasión. I picked this piece because it really emphasizes the fact that La Pasión and the music that Border Crossing does is connected to real present world events and histories that affect currently living people. Uh, I was so, how do I say, singing this song every time was just heartbreaking. And as Natalia has said, it was hard to sing through each time. And I've never had that experience with any other piece of music. I've never felt this deep, uh, both sadness and also pride. There's a sadness at the suffering that of Latin America, and there's a sense of pride at the resilience.
Todavía cantamos, todavía pedimos, todavía soñamos, todavía esperamos, todavía cantamos, todavía pedimos. Tengo gracias, Señor, tengo gracias, Señor. Demos gracias, Señor, que su amor es eterno. Demos gracias, Señor, y alabemos su nombre, cantemos al Señor, que su amor es eterno. Él es el Salvador. Aunque tiemble la tierra, demos gracias, Señor, que su amor es eterno, Él es el Salvador.
I'm going to sing a song that actually you've heard before. I sing a little bit at Cuéntame un cuenta. It's Deja que salga la luna. And why I picked this one is because there's a sound in it that is to me is so quintessential Mexican music. The recording that I recall with this one is Pedro Infante. There's a video of him doing that you can find on YouTube. Of course, accompanied by mariachi. And the style is wapango, and I love the basic sound and style and rhythmic pattern of wapango, and it just brings me a lot of joy. So, deja que salga la luna. Cuando estoy entre tus brazos, siempre me pregunto yo, ¿cuánto me debía el destino que contigo me pagó? Por eso es que ya mi vida toda le te entrego a ti. Tú que me diste en un beso lo que nunca te pedí. Yo sé que no hay en el mundo amor como el que me das, y sé que noche por noche va creciendo más y más. Y sé que noche por noche va creciendo más y más. Deja que salga